So my jaw hurts today, and I know that it's something to do with the lack of sleep, and at the same time, there's energies around us. Anyways, I digress. So hello, welcome. So communication. For me, that's a big thing. So I don't know about anybody else, because for me, I've never really understood how people communicate. When I say people, I mean a lot of humans. When I say I don't get it, it's because there's an insistence inside of like it's tied to self-worth for me. When I try to communicate, um, I don't really communicate also like the fact that I want feedback. That's one of the things I'm still learning. So for example, like, well, okay, that's that. But there's also the fact that when I say something, usually it's kind of either probably I feel like it's like weird, or that it's just out of this world, or people don't get it, or they don't know how to respond, they don't know what to say, or they're also just not at that level of kind of knowing themselves a little more. And I'm not trying to brag here, but I mean, like, for me, I think I've been, I could say, tested throughout my life of, being given these sort of, again, tests, what in terms of like what I want, what I really want. And usually lots to do a lot of it has to do with just not only being me myself, but also like finding what is, I guess what you can say, what resonates with me. I don't know about passion. I feel like that's kind of neutral now. But there are things that I'm still like that I still enjoy. I think it was exacerbated by the pandemic. We know this. A lot of people do feel that, um, but there's still that, at least this whole thing about communication. I feel like communication isn't just a one-way street. Um, I try to express how I see things. So I'll give you an example. So when I'm, for example, like communicating with foreigners, when I say foreigners, I mean people who don't speak English, and they want to help, they want to like get better at their English, right? Um, so I usually want to have like a sort of a flow, connection, just having it. But every time I try to explain it, even if I say something like, "Can you let me know?" Um, or I'd like some feedback. I have kind of done that a few times. So I'm still learning that. Um, what a lot of times is a lot of the responses I get from people is like zip, and to be honest, it's really frustrating. And it's really frustrating because it's like I don't know like what they want. And as far as I'm concerned, we don't read minds yet. We're not telepathic yet as a species. Eventually that will happen, but as of right now, we have mouths to use, right? So I come off as just sort of like, it's kind of rude. Maybe for some people it's rude or direct or abrupt or brash or whatever, right? That's one thing. So that's also something I'm learning, where instead of like expecting others to be communicative, I'm also communicating. But then I kind of just move on, or I try to move on. There are still people in my life where it's just like, you feel like there's a strong pull, like they don't know what they fucking want. And I'm saying fucking because it's like, it is frustrating. It is so frustrating. It's like, do you know not what you want? It's more like, do you know how you want it? Do you know why it's there? Why are you here? Why did you say yes to this in the first place? Why did I do it? Right? Another thing is like, for example, at work today, I told them, I said, I'm going to the washroom. I gotta take a dump. I'm gonna go to number two. I'll be back as soon as possible. And I called in late, and I just said, okay, well, this class might be considered like, they have a name for it. It might be like considered late, so I'd be like, it'll affect my, I guess, my status as like my whatever in the company. And personally, I don't really care about that much. It just like, it is what it is, because I'm hoping to eventually go through all the stuff that I go. Eventually, I want to be able to be independent and not work for anybody else. That's really what I want. So I guess I overcompensate still a little bit, and that's one of the things I do. I overcompensate for, like even now, like as I'm saying this, sometimes I say things that are just like, but I don't think people understand why I'm saying it. A lot of people I meet, they don't understand why I'm saying it. They're not willing to see through and ask even what that means if they don't get it. So usually there's this expectation, and this is just a truth that I noticed, like a pattern that I've noticed throughout my life. It's like people expect me to explain what I'm explaining, what I'm explaining, what I'm explaining. And it's almost like, why am I overcompensating for that shit? Like, why? Like, so I try not to do that as much anymore. But my point here is that when it comes to stuff like that, it feels uncertain. For me, it feels uncertain when people are not communicating. It's almost like, I get this from my mom, where it's just like, she communicates what she wants, but she's not direct about it. So I kind of get that from her. And at the same time, I get that from others, where it's like, they don't know how to communicate their emotions. So I think for me, the key has been to, I mentioned this before, where I say surrender. When I say surrender, I mean surrender to the emotional, like I wrote it down here, the emotional imprisonment of the stories in the head, right? Here's the ironic part, because we do get it from our parents because of our upbringing. It's a subconscious thing. My dad over communicates. I get that. My mother under communicates. So there's that. I call it. It's like, for me, it's like a rub off. It's like I realized years ago that I've always wanted balance. The Libra thing, I suppose. But expecting it of others has never really helped me. So the key to this whole thing, when you say mean what you say and say what you mean, stems from how one feels. So for example, how I feel, for example, is like, where does that come from? How I feel in terms of like, it feels like there's this absence again. Same thing that my parents did, where it's like they were there physically, but they weren't there emotionally. They were there financially or materially speaking, like, resource-wise, a roof overhead, that's great. But on the other side, of things, like in terms of like things that we need more, like not just basic needs, but emotional needs as well, because we do have that, they weren't there at all. So, or at least they were there physically, but then they were also not there physically. Like, as in, they were there materially, but then they would, for example, my dad would over deliver. He's quite sentimental. He'll say, I wish I could do this for you. I want to do this. Most of the time, most of my life, and most of the time, he'll just say it, but he doesn't mean it. There's no follow through. There's no integrity. So I grew up with that. Same with my mom is the opposite, kind of. Like, she'll say what she'll say, but she doesn't know. Her words doesn't match what she means to do. So it gets confusing. You see how there's that confusion? So I think the key here starts with being aware of how you feel. Usually it starts with the body. I've seen this, Eckhart Tolle talks about this. You become aware of the feelings in your body and the sensations. It's really the sensations, not so much the feelings. So when we hear feelings, we think emotions, right? But really, like, feeling, physical feeling, tactile feeling, sensations. You start to feel them, and you start to go, like, where is it heavy in your heart? Where is it there? Bring your awareness to that part, right? Now, awareness doesn't just happen, I find, for me, it doesn't just happen by just bringing the attention there, but actually sitting with it. Even if it's just like a minute or 2 or 5 minutes, if you can, and then just sit with it. And then journal it if you want to, or process it in your head, like, what does that feel like? Record yourself if you need to, right? There are many ways to kind of be aware of it, but you don't necessarily need to reveal what it is, as long as you know what that sensation is and you're aware of this. Like, that's what it is, okay? right? It takes practice. Like we're talking like years of practice, and that's how nature is, right? So there are many people out there who don't want to make that practice, and then they wonder. It's like, oh, I don't know. I'm not changing. I'm not healing. I'm not da da da. About all these things. I don't know what I want. So because you're not putting in the time, and it's okay to be worried that if you don't put in the time, it's like, people are so used to the one, that what do you call that panacea, like it's like that whole, what do you call that, like one trick wonder medicines, like, they want like a healing thing right away. They want healing as if it's like, oh, give me a Tylenol for my soul, give me a Tylenol for my spirit, give me this. And then we're so used to that. And if there's one thing that we've learned from, it's that those things are temporary. And we confuse it with the temporariness and impermanence of being. So we kind of went one-sided we kind of took it into like one direction. Like we just went, okay, so everything is temporary. So therefore this pain is temporary. So I must say everything's temporary. So everything is temporary. Everything I say is temporary. When I say temporary, I also mean like I equate that with it means nothing. That's not what temporary means. Temporary means temporary. Or I feel like, for me, when I hear the word temporary, and I don't know, I see things that, I don't know, I'm not trying to brag here, but it's like, I see things that a lot of people don't, and it feels, well, that's the other frustrating thing. But that too, it's like, you don't see the actions, like people don't see it, so they're not at that level of awareness. And that's the other thing too. People who don't know how to communicate well, and they don't give you feedback, or even if you say I'd like feedback and they don't communicate what you want to, and if you explain to them this is what I want, and then they get frustrated because you're not getting what they're saying, that's not up to you. If you know you're being clear with what you're saying and how you communicate and being honest with it, usually the truth comes out when you start owning those emotions. Owning the emotions has a lot to do with the awareness of those emotions. And I'm still learning that myself. There are times where I just explode, but I realize, like, okay, I did explode, and why is that? Right? And then I process it. So I step away. I step away from people. I step away from communication. That's when I'm silent. In my experience, though, when it comes to communication, people don't just step away, but they run away from it. It's not even stepping away. They're running away from it. They're just like, what does that mean? I don't know what he means. Da, 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 da. So, like that example of today where it's just like, I sense this sort of like, it's not that I want feedback, it's almost like I feel like there's a lack of, because I think it's from myself as well, my energy, where it's like, because I don't know how to express my confidence, or at least it seems, for me it feels like that. There's a disconnect between that and communication. I'm getting better at it, of course. So and so there's this disconnect between what we're feeling, or rather what the emotions we're feeling, and how we're actually going to communicate that. It's almost like we're just aware of it, but we don't know how to communicate that and put it in words, right? That's another thing too. I mean, like sometimes we just don't know how to put it in words. We just don't, and we don't really need to. For me, I usually just try to express that when it comes to something like this, it is very frustrating, because that frustration comes from this desire to flow, to connect with people. I always want to connect with people. I always want to connect at a deeper level, and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. When I say deeper, I don't necessarily mean we have to go super deep in emo, right? I'm just saying there's no flow, there's no, right? So I feel like the upbringing that I've had, how I grew up, with the lessons I'm learning and the people that I'm connecting with, there is still this, a lot of things to learn from. So it starts definitely with the owning the emotions, meaning bringing awareness to it. And you've heard it many times. Maybe you've heard it many times. If you haven't, that's how it is. You bring the attention to those sensations in the body, and you bring the sensations you bring the attention to those, like where it actually is. And it starts from there. And you kind of make a practice, even if it's 1 minute a day, 1 minute a day, 1 minute a day, 1 minute a day, right? It just becomes just practice. One of the things that for me, that pushed me towards more of a serious approach is not only because of the shift that's happening in the world. For those who don't know, there is a shift happening. There's an evolution happening with humans. Is that I got sick and tired of the physical, I guess you can say, discomfort from the stress of having to expect anything from people. And I just like, it's not that I don't expect people to do anything, it's more like I don't expect of myself to expect it of others, if that makes sense, right? I don't expect it of myself to be like, okay, well, that person's in their journey, right? In truth, we're not separate, but because of the life we're all living in this form, not only does it feel separate, but it's just like we have to accept that it's like they have to learn their journey. We cannot be there for them. We cannot just give them advice, especially when they're not asking for it. That's for another video though. But, right, so the key is really surrendering. And then bringing the awareness to the attention, rather, it starts with the attention to where that pain is, to where the sensations are. Especially if it's painful, all the more reason it should technically be. Not should, there's no should here, but yeah. So communication for me is a big thing. I just wanted to share that with you guys. Thank you for watching though, as I scratch my belly. See you guys later. Bye.